everyone, I'm Shaylin with Readsy, and today we're going to be talking about the 7 steps for creating a book cover design. Keep in mind that working with a professional designer is pretty much universally the best option if you are self-publishing. There may be a few cases where you might want to make your own book cover for personal use or whatnot, but if you want to be selling your book and creating a brand and marketing your book and competing with the quality of traditionally published books, then you will probably be wanting to work with a professional designer, which I'll talk a little bit about at the end of the video. There are really only a few reasons why you'd want to be DIYing your cover. First of all would be if you don't really care about sales. If you're just making your book available for a few people that you know to read it, and this isn't really a concern of yours, or if you are a professional designer yourself. So if you do encounter a situation where you want to make your own cover, here are some steps. First of all is to find inspiration. It's important that book covers appeal to their target audiences. You're going to see quite a difference in book cover trends for thrillers versus fantasy books versus romance novels, and really any genre across the board. So for example, here's some adult literary fiction, and you might notice a lot of adult literary fiction has very text-based covers. Here's another one, Exit West. Very, graphic, bold, text-based designs. Not all, but it's quite common. It's also quite common to see like the flower trend. So then let's compare this to like a YA contemporary. In YA contemporary, you again see a lot of, text-based things, but the colors are very different. There's that cheeriness, youthfulness. Again, lots of text-based covers, but the color schemes are very different. You see a lot of these kind of hand-drawn fonts. Then we can compare to some adult fantasy. Here we see much less text-based and much more image-based. They're very centered around the image rather than the text. You'll probably also notice differences in things like where there's illustration, where there's photography. Fantasy covers often have these elaborate illustrations, and then genres like romance or thrillers often have much more photography-based covers. I don't really have any romance or thriller on my shelf, or I would pull some examples. Whatever genre it is you're writing in, head out to a bookstore, look at some covers, see what the recurring trends are. This not only gives an idea of what works and what sells in your genre, but it can also give you some ideas. Step 2 is to get some design software. There are lots of really simple free design softwares out there like Canva, and they can actually make pretty sharp looking covers. The only problem is that they really only work from templates, so you don't have a lot of options or customizability. For something with infinite possibility, you'd probably want to look at something like Photoshop or InDesign. Or for a free alternative, you can look at GIMP. These programs give you the range to do pretty much anything. However, the learning curve is a bit steeper. You can use Photoshop for years and years and still not know all the functions. These programs are pretty much endless. Step 3 is to find images. Unless you're using your own photos or illustrations, you'll want to look for free use photos on stock website libraries like Pixabay, StockSnap, or Unsplash. For even more range, StockShutter has a huge library, and the license for a single image might only set you back a couple dollars. Step 4 is to figure out your cover dimensions. Now for an ebook, luckily this is relatively standard. The standard here is 2560 by 1600 pixels. However, it gets a bit more complicated for printed books. You'll have to factor in your book's genre, word count, and page density. The easiest tool I've found for this is CreateSpace's cover template. You basically just input all your book's details and you'll get a template you can open in pretty much any software. Step 5 is typography. Typesetting is a huge part of making a cover. Again, it really helps to look at books in your genre, see what's common, what kind of fonts are used, for example, serif, sans serif, handwritten, and how is the text used within the design. You'll want to use complementary fonts for things like the title and your name, and maybe also the tagline if you have one, but don't go too crazy. You don't want to crowd your cover with more than 2 or 3 fonts. You also don't want to use too many fonts that might be really bold or contrast each other. If your title font is really intricate, you'll want to keep it relatively simple for your name. You'll also want to keep your name relatively small. Although some super famous authors might have covers where their name takes up the majority of the cover, this is really uncommon for the majority of authors. The reason these authors' names take up so much space on the cover is because their brand as an author is worth more than the book's individual title. However, this isn't the case for the vast majority of authors. It's best to keep your name the same size as the title or smaller. You also don't need to include unnecessary things like written by, as that's fairly obvious. The unnovel line is used quite a lot on book covers. This isn't really necessary. I would really only recommend including it if your book's title might make it look like it could possibly be something else. For example, if hearing the title it could possibly be a memoir, then maybe including a novel is fair, but in most cases this is fairly intuitive. And finally, keep it simple. One of the common mistakes of cover making is just going overboard and making it too busy. A nice streamlined design is going to be much more eye-catching and pop much better than something really crazy that becomes quite incohesive. Step 6 is to make sure you export the files properly. Format will probably be JPEGs for ebooks and PDFs for print books, but make sure to follow the specific guidelines of the print-on-demand service you're using. And step 7 is to test your covers. If you have 2 designs and you can't decide which one is better, you can run them by a test audience. This can be done using Facebook advertising to run an A/B test. Basically, you send out 2 different advertisements to 2 different groups of people, both in your target audience. Whichever cover gets the most clicks is the one that was more successful within your target audience. So all this said, the best option really is going to be to work with a professional cover designer. Even if you have some design background or skills, it's probably not enough. I've taken a few classes in Photoshop, but I would not trust myself to design my own book cover. Keep in mind that on Amazon, when possible buyers see your book's thumbnail next to other books, nothing is going to distinguish them from traditionally published work. So your book's cover, the first thing readers are going to see about it, has to be on par with the general quality that one would expect from the publishing industry. Cover design is really complex. It takes more than just an understanding of Photoshop, but an understanding of how to communicate a book's feeling and message and concept through just design. When you're looking through portfolios to find a possible designer, look for designers who have lots of experience working in your genre. When you narrow down your options to a few designers you'd like to work with, send them each a brief introducing your project and yourself as a possible collaborator. It's okay to share other designs you like or any possible ideas, but don't be too prescriptive. After all, you're hiring this person because of their expertise in book cover design. If you try to make all the creative decisions for them, it kind of makes that a moot point. If you're working with a cover designer, there are 3 main possibilities for the style of design. The first is stock photo manipulation. This is generally the least expensive option and also the most common type of book cover design. Second up would be illustration. Sometimes illustrations can also be obtained through stock photo libraries, but for something very specific or complex, then this might increase your budget. For a really complex illustration, you can expect your design budget to double. And since not all cover designers are also illustrators, the illustration might be outsourced to an illustrator. Finally would be original photography. Original photography is most common in genres like memoirs and romance, but it can add quite a bit to your budget. Some designers have a photography setup and will be able to do simple things such as a hand holding an object. However, if you do need to hire a photographer, this can double or triple your budget. So those are the 3 types of book cover design and an introduction to how to design a book cover and work with a designer. To revisit any of the information in this video, you can check out the blog post linked in the description. And remember to subscribe for new videos every Tuesday and Friday. Thanks for watching. Until next time. Bye.